Hey, Baron. Here. Okay, so welcome. I'm Dr. David Lamson, chiropractor in Durango, and we are meeting today to make a recording and discuss with an expert on what's going on with the mandates across the country. We've heard from the news that there are vaccine mandates that are happening in Oregon and Washington, now in Denver. Those are being enacted, soon. And so we wanted to know from a healthcare perspective, what's going on in these laws? What can we do about it? And maybe what are some things that we can do to help protect our rights? And so we're really lucky today to have an expert. Baron Hogue is from the Chiropractic Defense Council, and he is the executive director there. And he has been working with different lawyers to discuss how they can best kind of attack this and defend our rights. And so we're really lucky to have Baron on here. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Baron. So thank you for being here. And then if people have questions or comments, we'll kind of save that for after the comments, and we can kind of just have a discussion at the end. So thank you all for being here, and welcome, Baron.
All right, thank you. Always appreciate the opportunity to talk with chiropractors, especially in these crazy times. So I'm going to kind of just explain a little bit who we are at the Defense Council, and then I'm going to get into the strategy because it's kind of the process that we've gone through to determine where we're going. So I'm not a chiropractor. I've been in the industry for 27 years. I've served in the profession in every capacity other than legally adjusting people in a clinic. And that was a joke. You're supposed to laugh at that a little bit, but that's okay. But I've owned clinics. I've been a consultant. I was the executive director of a state association. I've served on the executive committee of national associations. Again, really been in every facet of what's going on in the profession. And in 2016, I kind of left all of that and I started my nonprofit, One Chiropractic. I did it because, with all due respect, I feel the infrastructure of chiropractic is broken. It has been broken for some time, and it really is not capable of really leading our profession in any significant direction with the way that it's currently operating. Whether you know this or not, less than 10% of the licensed chiropractors in the United States belong to any national association. We're actually the only trade that has that much segregation within its own profession, which it's no wonder why we have some of the issues we have and why our profession spends more time circling the wagons and shooting inward than it does circling and communicating outward. So we all know this. We've all known this for years, but no one's really done anything significant to fix it. So I'm the kind of guy that says, let's do something different. One of my favorite quotes is from Buckminster Fuller that says, you can't change an existing reality by fighting it. You need to create a new model that makes the old model obsolete. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make a different way of doing things in our profession that produces a different outcome. So anyway, One Chiropractic started as we're a 501c6 nonprofit. The difference between a C6 and a C3 is the ability to lobby, to litigate, to fight on specific issues. C3s cannot use their money to lobby on behalf of anything or to hire attorneys to do those types of things. So we were a C6, knowing that someday this type of thing would be happening, and our profession really wasn't in a position to handle it and from my perspective and the perspective of those that were supporting the creation of this new organization. So we've been doing some things over the years. We initially to stop the expansion of chiropractic to include drugs. We've taken on some patient stuff. We've been working diligently to get chiropractic into the military. So over the last 6-7 years, we've been doing different projects. We've had a handful of contributors, right around 300 people giving us money every month to support our efforts. Relatively insignificant, but alive. In February, I had a conversation with a couple of friends, and it really, an idea was pitched to me that I thought was actually brilliant. And that was the creation of the Chiropractic Defense Council. We're calling it CDC intentionally to grab your attention. But essentially, the Chiropractic Defense Council was back then, in concept, to create an organization that has a very singular focus to defend the rights of practicing chiropractors around the world. At that time, we were dealing with issues in Australia of chiropractors not being able to treat pediatrics. The x-ray issues in Canada started happening in British Columbia, where they could no longer take routine x-rays unless there was a significant structural finding. We a few years prior, we had issues in Texas where they came after the ability for chiropractors to use the word neurological and therefore removing their ability to diagnose. So we've had attacks on chiropractic really since our inception, but our profession really wasn't prepared to take on these bigger issues. Associations don't have the revenue. We're segmented. Some states have multiple associations. There was just a lot of, again, segmentation, and there was no real defense system for our profession to be able to take on these issues immediately. When I was talking with a couple of doctors up in British Columbia, they said it took them 6 months to raise the money, interview attorneys, and all that to be able to respond to their regulatory boards on the X-ray issue. And by that time, they'd missed important junctions within that window to be able to fight that particular regulation. So that was part of our concept, is what if we had attorneys, lobbyists, PR firm, researchers, content experts, all on retainer, all teched up, ready to go, that the minute there was an issue, we could deploy them and immediately attack any issue that happened, like a defense system, similar to our military. We viewed it as an organization kind of like the Navy SEALs, where we would come in and work with any organization. The Navy SEALs don't make the Army irrelevant. They don't make the Navy irrelevant. They don't make the Air Force irrelevant. They are very, very specific in the task that they carry, and they work with anybody in conjunction with that particular mission. And that was our viewpoint, that we would be doing something no one else had done. No one's going to have the attorneys that we have. No one's going to have the PR firm, the lobbyist, all of that stuff, specifically for the ability of defending the rights of practicing chiropractors. And so we started building it back in February. We started putting the website together, interviewing attorneys, interviewing PR firms, lobbyists, all of this stuff, started shopping the idea around to certain people around the profession, slowly starting to elevate our contributions, and those types of things, knowing also that someday something was going to happen in the United States with this vaccine and all of those types of things. We'd heard threats about it for a long time, but we didn't know when it was going to happen. We launched the CDC in July when we had a summit we called Out of the Storm, Chiropractic in a Post-COVID World. And we interviewed 23 people from around the world, and we kind of did a SWOT analysis of chiropractic, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it was kind of an awareness to the profession that, hey, there are great things happening. Those of us that are on this side of the camp, our businesses are busier than ever. I own clinics now, and I started it in the middle of the pandemic, and we're doing amazing. The world is far more receptive to what we have to say today than it was a year ago. However, that growth also brings potential threats, and we wanted to be prepared for those threats. So we'd been sharing with people what we were doing, and then all of a sudden 3 weeks ago, the proverbial shit hit the fan, and California was the first state to throw out the mandate. So we immediately went into action, started reaching out, talking to the state association, talking to attorneys, doing some research, submitting opinion letters. And then 2 days later, California exempted chiropractors. So now in California, chiropractors are not under the mandate there. Then Oregon went and did the mandate, but they allowed for testing as an alternative to vaccines. Then Washington went with no testing alternative. Then Denver went. Now Rhode Island has gone. New Jersey went, but it doesn't include chiropractors. So we just have these random mandates that are popping up all over. And your guys' is very interesting because your governor, from the research we've done, your governor is the kind of person to make enemies. So he lets all of his political leaders underneath him take the arrows for these types of things, which is why it's not a statewide mandate and why it's just the mayor of Denver, which is the highest percentage of population in Colorado. So we have these different mandates. So we immediately went out and got more attorneys, started looking at these mandates, understanding what our options are. We started connecting with other groups outside of chiropractic that are on the same issue with us, because clearly these mandates don't just affect chiropractors. We talked to Robert Kennedy's group at the Children's Defense Fund. We talked to Del Bigtree's group at ICANN. We talked to Lee Dungus out of California. We talked to Pam Pomper with Make Americans Free Again. We've talked really with everybody that is a key movement in these mandates and what their strategies and what they're doing. So here's what we're not doing. We are not going after the mandate. Unfortunately, the court system is setting precedent that they're upholding the executive authority of the governors and mayors on this because we're under a quote unquote pandemic. So I know a lot of you guys, I've talked to a lot of chiropractors and they're throwing me all the science. They're throwing me all the the research that shows why this vaccine doesn't matter, why this new Delta variant. I've even got in writing from Fauci, that little weasel, stating that even those that get the vaccine are inevitably going to get COVID. So like I get it. We all know that this vaccine is a ruse. We know this has nothing to do with health. There's an agenda, but none of that matters because nobody's listening, because it's been successfully brought to our world as a pandemic, which means the majority of the laws and rules that exist to protect you and I are out the window for the greater good of humanity. So as we're looking at options of going after the constitutionality of the mandates, of going after, segregation, going after civil rights, all of these different things, going the legal route, it's a fool's errand right now, because the courts they're not done. We don't have enough. And chiropractic specifically, we don't have the revenue, nor do we have the numbers to really, even with our patients, to be able to make a big enough impact to get them to either carve us out or to actually go and change this mandate. So our strategy shifted a little bit after consultation with a number of people. And we started really looking at the mandate and looking exactly what the mandate says and what, exemptions they accept and how all of that works and what is the structure. So unfortunately, I hate doing this, but I'm so close to launching this thing that I don't want it to get out too soon. So I'm going to give you as much information as I can to let you know that we have a plan that we're very confident in, but I can't give you all the details right now. But we believe that there's two sides to this particular issue. One of them is we're calling it a shock and awe campaign. We believe that they have zero ability or intent to enforce these mandates because they really don't have the capability of doing so. Especially the mayor. The mayor does not have the staff. This isn't a state mandate, it's a city mandate. He does not have the staff to go to all of the people that this mandate covers to make sure that they're in compliance. They just don't have it. They literally are incapable of doing it. And they haven't really put any structure in place to be able to do that either. So we believe that one of their strategies is to create a bunch of noise, get those people that are on the fence and get another 15 to 20% vaccinated, which they're after their goal of 70% of the United States vaccinated. So we think that this is partially a ruse from a standpoint of they really have no intent to actually mandate it. So which means they're not really breaking any laws if they're not shutting people down or fining them because they're not complying. So that's one school of thought. And there's a substantial amount of evidence to potentially support that. On the other side, if they are going to actually enforce it and somehow there's this, task force that's put in place that's going to start knocking on the doors of businesses saying, show me your vaccination records. We wanted to have a plan where you could be in compliance, but it didn't force you to actually have to get the vaccine. So we've been looking at religious exemption experts. We've been looking at language experts and the mandates. And we found a way where chiropractors can be compliant, which actually buys time essentially. And it removes the legal battle away from the mandate itself, and it moves it to the exemption process. So follow my logic here. Right now, the big issue that we're hearing about is MDs, nurses, all of these people are doing religious exemptions, but their employers are not accepting them. Have you guys heard that? Thumbs up, hands raised, right? We've heard they're not accepting them. They're not valid. But when you really look at the language of the mandate says it's up to the employer to take charge, or HR to take charge of those exemptions. So it's the employer that decides if they accept them or not. The loophole for chiropractors are you're the employer. So you get to accept the exemption form. So if your staff submits an exemption form to you rather than a vaccination card, it's your choice if you're going to take that exemption form or not, which in most cases, you're going to take it because you filled one out for yourself, right? I mean, that's logic in this process. By doing so, you have complied with the mandate because the mandate allows religious exemptions. Now, I'm going to stop here because I always get someone that interrupts me and says, well, our state's about ready to remove the religious exemption in lame duck. It doesn't matter. It's in the federal civil rights of 1964. It doesn't matter if your state has its own religious mandate exemptions. There is federal law that would trump it anyway. And I've got 5 attorneys that are experts in this particular area that are ready to go if anyone challenges, right? So the concept is this, that we are going to put together a strategy with talking points to your patients, talking points to the community, the process that you need to go through in your office to be in compliance with the mandate. Now, please don't get proud on me and don't be like, screw that. I will never say I'm complying with this dumb mandate. Listen, our goal number one is to make sure you can still practice without getting jabbed, right? That's priority number one. And I hope you would agree with me. When there's a clock ticking on this supposed timeline, I got to make sure that you can practice in compliance so that you have no fear about getting shut down. And I hope you can agree with me on that. Secondly, we then need to make sure we have a legal defense that if anyone comes after you because of you being in compliance, then we are going to defend you. And that's not going to be a cost to you as an individual. Anyone that follows our recommendations, we will cover your legal costs in the event that there is any type of accountability or enforcement of the mandate. But here's the logic in this process. You have a meeting with your staff. You sit down and say, okay, listen, by the end of the month, you either need to supply me with vaccination records or an exemption form. Hopefully, if you're educating your employees, they're going to provide you with an exemption form. All you're going to do is file them. You're just going to file it and you're just going to hold it and you are now in compliance. When your patients ask you, what are you guys doing about this? Your answer is, we're in compliance. That's your answer. We are not getting on a soapbox. Chiropractors love to fight. We love to be on the leading edge of these things. This is not a battle that chiropractic needs to be the face of. This is not what we fall on the sword for as a profession. We have a strategy of how we're going to help with the big picture. But first and foremost, I need you guys to be able to continue to love and serve your communities. So you're going to have a staff meeting. You're going to give them the option of the vaccination or the exemption. You are just going to hold them. Chances are no one is ever going to reach out to you. No one's ever going to look for them. If you communicate appropriately, which we have our PR firm right now creating talking points, creating scripting on the right way to deal with certain questions that patients are going to ask, because really the only potential kink in the system is your patients reporting you. If you have one of those cranky patients that come in and say, I can't believe you're not vaccinated and you're still operating, yada, 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 right? So there's a way to communicate how you're in compliance with this particular mandate, but it also still gives you the freedom to choose. Then you're just going to sit on it. In the event that someone comes and says, okay, show me that you're in compliance, and you hand them your exemption forms and they say these are unacceptable, that's when our team jumps in and we defend you on that. But the beauty of this is we've now taken the legal argument away from the mandate, which is where the title of pandemic erodes all of our rights. And we've now moved it into the validation of a religious exemption form, which we have precedent all over in the history of our country to be able to win that. And they've never won it. And to give you a proof of my point, if you remember when the Obamacare came out and they were mandating that you had to cover contraception within insurance policies. And if you remember, the Catholic Church and other religious organizations really balked at that and claimed religious exemption. That went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they won on the basis of religious exemption. So this does hold true. And to be clear, the way that the 1964 Civil Rights Act reads, you don't have to be a card-carrying member of the Nazarene Church on your corner. All you have to do is have a significant belief in a topic for it to classify as a religious exemption, right? So we don't have to go and start a chiropractic church. We don't have to start holding revival services and all that for the exemption form to qualify. There is precedent, there is language. All you have to do is have a strongly held belief. That's it. That's the language within that civil rights movement, and that qualifies as an exemption. So that's our strategy one of what we're doing. And I'm working with the attorneys, and hopefully by the end of next week, we are going to be rolling this out as a system, like phase one, here's what you do. Phase two, here's what you do. I am in conjunction with the Colorado Chiropractic Association as well. We're talking very closely. They are in the process of writing a letter to the governor. I support their strategy here and trying to explain to the governor why what's happening in Denver is bad news for them, and to follow suit like California and New Jersey and exempt chiropractors. I support that effort. That's right to come from the association. So they're going that route. And I think that's a phenomenal strategy and idea, because the governor, does have a lot to lose if this thing goes sideways. And the fact that it didn't come from the governor, we could potentially use him as an opportunity to basically exempt chiropractors. So I don't know if that's going to have any weight. I don't know the political climate in Colorado, but I do support that particular movement that they're doing. We, however, want to work on the individual practice level and make sure that you guys are covered and taken care of. Phase 2, and then I'm going to stop for questions. Phase 2, I also know that chiropractors are fighters, and the fact that I'm asking you to sign a piece of paper and shut your mouth is not going to go over very well for chiropractors. That's not enough. Like, we got to do more. And so we are going to activate our patient bases. So there are obviously other specialties that are affected by this particular mandate outside of just us. You have nurses, dentists, MDs, neuros, orthos. There are a lot of people that are affected by this. And there's a good subset in that community that agree with us and believe this vaccine is not appropriate and it's not fair. They should have the right to choose. But that's not our fight, right? Like, chiropractic can't be the face of that. We're not big enough. We're all independently owned. We can't stop healthcare by us walking out. However, if we can get a group of nurses or MDs to walk out of their hospital, they can cripple the healthcare system in their community, forcing things to happen. If you think about it, that's the only way anything's ever happened in our country, is when enough Americans get pissed off and they break something. And that's potentially what we're working with other groups like Make Americans Free Again, the Children's Defense Fund. All of those groups are working with these other specialties. So what we're going to do is, for those patients that are coming to you like, doc, what do I do? We're going to give you resources to get them connected with the right group in your state, to be able to feel like they're not alone and to coordinate those efforts so that there is a bigger purpose that we're after. Obviously, get rid of these mandates completely, but to do that legislatively is a fool's errand right now. There are groups, we have a number of attorneys that we're working with on these issues that are actually going after big pieces of litigation, and we'll support how we can. But our focus is chiropractors and the chiropractor's ability to remain practicing without having to get jabbed. So that we're very singular in that mission. So there's a two-pronged attack. We will be releasing this information as soon as it's done and ready to roll. Definitely, but a good amount of time before your guys' quote unquote deadline hits. But we've done a lot of work on this. I'm very adamant. It's a strategy that can be successful. Everyone that that has challenged me on it, when we got done with it, they've shaken their head and say, you know what, this is a good strategy. So, and we have the legal team behind us. We have firms in DC, we have firms in New York. We're working on securing counsel in Colorado. We're talking with the attorney for Mile High, and we're talking with the attorney from the association. So we're communicating, making sure everyone's aware of the strategy, and we're all pulling from the same end of the rope. So that's what we've been doing, and that's our strategy right now. Our biggest need is funding, which everybody's biggest need is funding. But I'm now up to 7 attorneys that I'm paying, $300 to $400 an hour for. But we're going to keep doing it. So our ask has been, our goal is to get 5,000 people giving us $33 a month. That generates just under $2 million that is completely dedicated for this type of work. Our commitment is that, this is not the kind of nonprofit where, 80% goes to administrative, 20% goes to the mission. It's 90% goes to the mission, 10% goes to the administration. Our finances will be on our website every quarter. You can see them. You can see exactly what we're bringing in, where we're spending it. So we're completely transparent in what we're trying to do. But we believe we have an opportunity here to actually bring chiropractic together in a way that we never have. Even in the Wilkes case, we didn't come together as a profession. That was just a few people. What I'm trying to do is create a new model that makes the old one obsolete. I'm trying to prove we can come together on singular topics that we can all align with. All of us do a little bit. I don't think anyone can argue that $33 a month is going to break anybody. But if I get enough people doing that, we create a resource that our profession's never had that's literally ready to go the minute there's an issue. So, we've got the structure in place. You're welcome to Google me. I've got a pretty good resume of the work that I've been a part of and my integrity. But we're on this, and we've been on it since day one. If you think about it, we're 3 weeks in and we've already retained all of these counsel. We have a plan, we have a strategy, we're putting it together, and we're going to roll it out all within a month. And with all due respect, I don't know the last time chiropractic's done anything in a month this significant. So I'm kind of tooting my own horn, but it really has to do with everyone. Arno, I can't thank you enough, brother. You have been an unbelievable champion. You and I had a conversation, and since that day, you have connected me to people that has helped this. So it's not really been me. It's been everybody bringing everything to the table, using the Chiropractic Defense Council as the hub, bringing everything here, and then us sifting through it to bring the right strategy back to the profession. So it's working. I'm very excited to be a part of what's going on. And I'm adamant chiropractors are going to be fine. We are going to be able to practice. We have a strategy. It's going to be okay. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions or comments you guys have.
So please feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question. I guess, Baron, thank you so much. That was a great synopsis of what's going on. I guess, you kind of addressed this, but since there's going to be people listening to this that are nurses and maybe MDs and, yoga therapists and massage therapists, different, acupuncturists, and different kind of spectrum, it sounds like for those people, this fight is kind of like working for the exemption rights. It's going to impact us all. It's going to help benefit us all. But it sounds like for people that are in kind of a hospital setting or a situation where their employer is requiring it, the exemption is kind of the way to go.
It is, but it's a little bit different. The loophole for us that I feel so confident in is that we are the owner. So if there's anyone listening to this that's not in chiropractic, but you own your business, you don't work for anyone else, this strategy works for you. 100% works for you. And if we'll help you how we can. Again, we're allocated to chiropractic. So I want to be true to the people that are contributing, that we're doing with their money what we said we would do. But the strategy nonetheless will still work. For those that don't own their business, the problem we're seeing is that the hospitals and large businesses, they're not accepting exemptions. They're creating what they're calling exemption committees to review all of the exemptions submitted, and then they're denying them. Now we're creating our own exemption forms. I strongly recommend you do not use the exemption forms provided by your employer. They're designed to be denied because that's the intent. So if you're going to do an exemption form, find one from an attorney that does exemption work and submit your own. And honestly, it can be a Word document where you can just put on it, according to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VII, it says that my employment cannot be hinged on anything that violates my religious belief. I am strongly against using any type of outside, poison in my body, or aborted fetuses, or whatever you want to use as your thing that you're against. It doesn't have to be you're a Catholic and you don't believe in abortion. It doesn't have to be that you're, Amish and you don't believe in any medicine. It doesn't have to be that staunch. It just has to be a significantly held belief system. And you just put that on your form. So I can't force your employer to accept them. That you could go out and get an attorney and force the employer to do it that way, but that would get kind of expensive. This strategy works for those that employ themselves. If we were in a different boat, I would probably have a different strategy. So unfortunately, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about other scenarios because they don't necessarily apply to us.
Okay, great. And so, for people that are, it seems like the employer, if they're making the decision, they can potentially be held liable too for discrimination. And who's to say
ultimately,
that the employer has the right to decide if your exemption is valid or not?
Ultimately, yes. But again, you have to be careful because we're in this pandemic world, right? So a lot of the things that we would use in any other scenario don't apply, like HIPAA. HIPAA doesn't apply to this because you can ask anyone if they've had their vaccine because we're in a pandemic, right? Which is really a HIPAA violation. In any other time in history, you cannot walk up to someone and say, hey, have you had this? Or do you have this disease? Or do you have this diagnosis? You can't share that information. That's protected health information. But because we're under a pandemic, that doesn't apply anymore. So the liability to an employer, although I believe if someone hired an attorney and they went after their employer, I think you would win over time. But I think it would be a very expensive battle. Educating your employer, we have some videos that we can send. One of the attorneys that we have in New York he was the attorney for the frontline doctors. I think most of you have heard of that group that stood in front of the Capitol and right when the pandemic came out and said the truth about not oxycodone, but hydroxychloroquine. And they talked about all of that. Well, the guy that worked with them is one of our attorneys that we have in retainer, and he is a freaking bulldog, and he does a phenomenal 20-minute presentation about religious exemptions and how people can really use them in a lot of different settings. So there are resources out there that are available for those people that are not self-employed. But yeah, it's easy to throw around things that make sense in our brain, but we're in a world where common sense no longer applies, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. It looks like we have a question maybe from Dr. Mo from the Prana Foundation. And she says it's about British Columbia. Exceptions are not accepted everywhere. What specific advice do you have for DCs to stay legally safe if exemptions are not accepted, as was just announced by British Columbia yesterday?
Yeah, so I actually am just now working. His name is Rocco. What is his name? Rocco something. He's an attorney in Toronto. I'll be honest with you. I'm on a massive learning curve in Canada about your guys' laws and regulations. So I don't know what the strategy is going to be in Canada yet. I'm on it. I'm working with both organizations in Canada, where I'm hopefully connecting with Rocco and his firm here shortly. And we want, because you guys even have a shorter deadline. Like they just did this and said, okay, you got to have it done in like 14 days, which doesn't make any sense because none of them work that fast. But anyway, so we're on it. I have to learn Canada. I don't know your guys' regulatory system there as well as I do the United States, but we're on it. I've been on the call all morning today, working with all of the groups, coordinating an effort. And once we have a strategy up there, once we understand, then we'll do it. All I'm going to tell you, and yes, call me naive, call me, a rainbow chaser, but there's a way. We're going to find a way. We're going to find it.
The biggest concern, of course, is that they are not going to accept exemptions because we are officially in a state of pandemic. And right. Are there any other strategies outside of exemption at this point?
No, not from us, because that's what's going to work here in the US. But like I said, I'm hoping.
Well, I'm not convinced it's going to work in the US either. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and we're in a state of, pandemic.
Yeah,
so
but it's
things are going to be overturned. And I'm not convinced. I have a lot of chiropractors that we work with who are, in states where it's like, you got to get the vaccine or close your doors. And we're sort of telling them, you just have to wait until, we get a little bit further along here. But this is, it's a lot to imagine that your organization is going to be able to have a lawsuit for every single chiropractor that gets in trouble.
Well, in that case, it turns in, first of all, as I told you in strategy one, their ability to actually do that and enforce it's mind blowing that they could. If they do, all I can say is we'll figure it out at that point. We have the attorneys lined up. We already have the defense strategy in place that's already won in other issues. In this particular issue, the religious exemption is not null and void because it's in a pandemic. That particular issue is not null and void. And we've researched that multiple times with multiple different firms. So again, the first thing is to make sure that we can say we're in compliance. Then if they come and they actually look at it and want to see it and they say that they're not going to accept the exemption forms, and it doesn't matter if the state has their own exemption form or not, or exemption rule or not, because there is the federal exemption rule, then we deal with it at that time, and we've got the strategy and there is precedent, whether it's a pandemic or not. So, because this isn't the first time that the United States has ever been in a pandemic. So there is precedent when it comes to this type of documentation. And I don't say this because it was my bright idea. I say this because it's been the consensus with a number of different firms and their ability to defend it and to see it as a viable option to move forward. So I can't promise you anything. I'm just telling you it's the best strategy we have with the 30-day window that we have in most states. And it's the direction we're going, because the only other option is to go after the constitutionality of the mandates, which I'm telling you, governors have the ability to kick that straight up to the Supreme Court, and then it's over. And they've already set precedent that they're upholding the executive authority of these leaders. So I'm not throwing millions of dollars into a lawsuit that it's just over and we don't get that money back. There's other methods of trying to create change and do that. And that's why we're supporting the other healthcare specialties that can actually cripple the healthcare system, should they choose to actually bond together and do that.
Rocco Galletti is the lawyer
Yes.
you're talking about in Toronto.
Yes.
And he says that, seeking an exemption really doesn't make any sense. And that really looking at a human rights violation is what's probably the safest bet when you do get to talk to Rocco. I'm sure he'll tell you the same thing.
And that might be in Canada. I'm just telling you, in US attorneys, that they are strongly believing that. So again, I don't know Canada law, as I stated in the beginning, and it might be a civil rights thing. And if that's the case, that'll be our approach in Canada. But I know here in the United States, the people that are running the front of most of this stuff, this is where it's falling right now.
And are you recommending that people have to belong to any particular church, or
No.
they can just simply say, like, are you going to release a document or something
Yes.
that chiropractors can use?
Yes. So we're going to have a whole packet that we're going to do on how to communicate it, how to answer when patients ask you, what are you doing? What do you say with that? How you run your staff meeting, because there has to be an actual staff meeting where you talk to your staff and give them the option of the vaccine or filling out the exemption form. There's a whole process that needs to go where we're checking the boxes if anyone comes after us.
And I'm thinking specifically of chiropractors too, that are in, new chiropractors in practice by themselves that don't even necessarily have staff.
Well, but they pay themselves through it. So they're staff. So
Yeah.
that still applies.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay.
Dr.
And when will this be available?
I'm hoping, right now I'm waiting on my PR firm to get everything written and put into a nice package, because I've worked with chiropractors for a long time. So this has got to be bullet point 1, bullet point 2, and everything laid out. So as soon as that's done, we've already got, the form has already been, looked over by all of our attorneys and said, yeah, this is stuff that we would be willing to defend. And so all that's done. So now I'm working on the process of the scripting and the communication and how do we answer it? What do we say? All that. So I'm hoping no later than the end of next week.
Okay.
Dr. Mo, I can hear the kind of the timeline that you're under in Canada. So, I totally get it. Another thing that people have been looking at is common law. I put a link, commonerlaw.com, and that some people have been using that in San Francisco. Nurses and doctors have been filing common law letters, and that does give you some leverage. Look into it, like research it. It's kind of the basis of all foundational law. And that can also give you some leverage in terms of, protecting your rights. So I would definitely look into that if you want. I can connect you with some common law experts too that we interviewed the other day. So just want to put that in.
We have a number of docs that we're working with in the States who, are asking us, what the hell do we do? Docs in Washington who are like, we've just been told we have to, my practice is just getting off the ground and they're telling me I need to be vaccinated. So I just really want a substantive plan that's, going to support them and give them exactly what they need.
And here's the honest to God truth. I'm not going to promise anyone that this strategy is God's gift to these mandates. It's just the most researched, where I can find the most commonality with all of our attorneys, and it meets the need right now. At the very least, it makes people compliant for a period of time where we're not under this 30-day window, right? Because now it's going to require them to come in and actually ask to see them. And then there's a fight about whether the form is actually acceptable. I mean, there's a process now that doesn't put us in this 30-day window where people are thinking they're going to have to sell their practices, right? It's just the most viable process we have with the time that we have. We're still going to keep working and talking. And if there becomes a lawsuit that is viable, we'll jump in hand over fist and we will jump on it. But for right now, we've got to do something now, because it's going to take 3 to 4 weeks to disseminate it, to get everyone on board. We've got to do something. And so what we've been doing night and day for the last 3 weeks is really vetting every possible strategy that has any prayer of a defense. And this is the one that we've rested on, based on precedent, based on the knowledge of different attorneys, based on the success of this through the Obamacare situation, based on what does and doesn't fall underneath the pandemic definition. All of those types of things have been considered in this particular strategy. And it's the one that we're going to roll out, and people can choose whether they want to follow it or not.
Okay. So just to confirm that you don't anticipate having this plan made available publicly for another 3 or 4 weeks. Is that correct?
Oh, no. It'll be available hopefully by the end of next week. I'm saying it's going to take 3 to 4 weeks for it to get disseminated to everyone and it get in place. But no, I'm hoping to have it. The task has been given to my team. I got to have it in my hand, ready to go and ready to be distributed by the end of next week. So that would make it another week. And then we have 3 weeks for most states to be able to roll it out.
Okay.
Baron, I hate to ask this, but is there any way that, it sounds like people in Canada are really under the gun right now.
Yeah.
Is there any way that they could just get the exemption form?
I mean, they can't. I just don't know if it's any good up there. I really don't know the laws up there. And according to Rocco, which is the attorney I was highly recommended, he's saying that's a fool's errand up there. They don't have the same legal system that we do. They don't have the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So, which is what this is all hinged on, and So,
But if we had an exemption form that they're going to be using in the States, then at least would be worth a shot to, if we had the forms.
I'm happy to share it. I'll give it to everybody. But I really want to come up with a strategy that I know is defensible in Canada, which, may be the civil liberties thing. And I got to get the guy to call me back, and I got to rally everybody together. And we have to go through the same process that we did here in the States, which hopefully within a week we can, and I know that timeline is so crunched, but I'm just not Canadian, and I've never operated up there, so I don't know. But I'll share it. I actually, if you message me, Doc Mo, if you message me your thing, I'll give you one of the forms right away, and you can look at it. I don't know if it's worded properly, because the exemption form uses U.S. law in the exemption form. Like, we're using the actual defense in the form itself, and I don't know how applicable it is there, but you could grab something from it and it might make something. And then once we understand Canadian, structure, we'll word one that's specific for that.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Baron.
Fair enough.
Baron, I posted some questions on the chat, if you can answer those.
Did you gain money support from ICA, FCO, ACA colleges? So ICA, not money. No, I haven't gotten a single dollar from any organization. Everything's come from individuals. So I've been talking to colleges before, or go ahead.
Are you working at Life University, Sherman College, different
I've talked to Rob Scott.
Yep,
I've talked to Rob Scott. I've talked to Ed. I've talked to Neil. They're all aware of this. I've been telling them it's coming. I'm waiting. They've told me they're going to support. It just hasn't happened yet. So they know about us. They know what we're doing. I haven't talked to them in the last week because I've been so busy doing this stuff. ICA is aware. I've talked to Beth Clay. They actually did push out one of my videos on their Facebook feed, which was a surprise to me. I didn't know they were doing that. So clearly they're on board enough to share it with their members. But as far as them giving resources, that has not happened yet. And then as far as what we're doing with patients, I had in Oregon, I had a number of doctors ask me to shoot a video that they could give to their patients. I'm not against doing that. It's just, again, our organization is to protect the rights of chiropractors. And when you start bringing in a lot of non-chiropractic money, then they really want you to take on every college that wants to vaccinate their kid before they come back, or it just becomes way bigger than our scope. Part of our success is that we're going to be laser focused and do that. But there are patients that would give because they don't want to lose their chiropractor. Like, if this means that I give $33 a month to make sure my chiropractor stays and is available for me, there are patients that would do that. So we are recording one just in their language that makes more sense. And then doctors can choose to send that if they want to, but I have no plans of creating an organization that really goes after bringing the general public in.
Okay. And my last question was, do you support civil disobedience?
Yeah, I mean, I will. If it comes down to it and this strategy doesn't work, come after me. I'm just going to do it. And I think there is some strategy. If you really look at our recommendation, that's kind of what we're doing. We're doing it under the ruse of we're in compliance because we're using the religious mandate. But essentially we're saying, call my bluff, like, come get me. Because there's really their ability to enforce this. I don't know how they're going to do it. They may cherry pick a couple people here and there, but to actually go door to door and make everyone supply the information, I don't know how they're going to do it. They don't have, especially Denver, because it's a city. It's not even a state. It doesn't have the state agency to help them. So I just think a lot of this is smoke and mirrors, and it's to get everyone riled up, and it's to scare people into submission and see where the dust settles. And then they'll come with another round after it if that didn't get the response they wanted. And then we'll be prepared for that round as well. But for right now, yes, at the end of the day, it's going to happen anyway, because chiros are not going to do it. I mean, they'll move. I mean, they're already moving. I've literally seen so many people moving out of California, going to Florida and Texas, because they're like, I'm just going to a state where I know something like this won't ever happen. And so I know this is a line in the sand issue for chiropractic. And at the end of the day, in my clinics, if Ohio ever does it, we'll civil disobedience all day long, because I'm not going to force my team, and they'll have to come shut me down because I'm not going to stop. So me personally, yes, I'm about civil disobedience in this particular regard.
I've also heard from some CEOs that, hospitals that are getting pressured to mandate with their doctors and nurses, they're on this fine line where if they have enough nurses and doctors that that say, no, I'm not going to do that and leave, they're going to be out of luck. They're going to be short staffed. So it's really an important time to actually have civil disobedience in some ways and have people, stand up for their rights. So,
and that's part of what we're finding out, which is why phase 2 of our strategy is to really get our nurses and doctors together with these other organizations, because that's what they're planning, is a massive walkout. And we apparently, I don't have this information, this is what I was told, but they have data that says that a number of these hospital systems have had emergency meetings with their boards because they know financially it'll cripple them if they lose like 30 people, because they're already short staffed as it is. And they can't afford traveling nurses. There aren't enough traveling nurses. And even so, they could only afford it for about a week, and then they're just screwed. Now, I hate that strategy because that really sucks for anyone that needs emergency care. But at the same time, this is just unacceptable what they're doing. It's just not acceptable. So they've created it, themselves. And I think it'll be scary for a little bit, and then it'll force some change in the overall rhetoric.
Yeah, I personally, for the last 20 years, I've practiced without a license because the law in Colorado, to me, is not a chiropractic law. So it's required me to practice in ways that this is not what chiropractic is, or the ways that I was taught. And I believe strongly that if more and more chiropractors are willing to go like, I don't care, I'm just keep practicing, go bust me. The state cannot handle that many lawsuits.
I agree. I agree. Yep.
And Arnaud, people are getting help doing that with common law. They're using common law. There's MDs and even nurses and chiropractors that are using common law to kind of revoke their license so they don't have the leverage over them. Obviously, that's kind of a radical step that not everyone's going to be into, but it does kind of eliminate that leverage that the state has over you to dictate what you do. And there are still protections that you can still have. So,
yeah, I think we're going to see that happening more and more with chiropractors just not saying they're practicing chiropractic.
Yeah.
In Canada right now, it's become untenable, and we need some other options.
Well, you have my word. We're going to research, and I'm going to work with whoever I've got to work with. We're not going to leave Canada behind. We're going to. I just unfortunately don't have the historical knowledge that I do for the U.S. But we're not going to leave that alone.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
Yep.
Aaron, can you just, before we close, first I want to thank you for your time and the effort and your passion that you put into it. But can you post maybe on the chat the way that anyone on this call can promote the CDC, including maybe the way to propagate the videos that you have?
Yeah, I'm going to be recording some new videos here shortly, just because most of those are outdated now with what's been happening, with appropriate attire on, Arno. And yes, and so the best thing to do is our website, which I've already put on there, defendchiropractic.org. That is the hub. That's where most of the information's at. But I am going to be shooting. If you go to our Facebook page and look up One Chiropractic on Facebook, I post everything on that page. That has my other older videos that if you look at it and you feel it's relevant and you want to send it to your tribe, have at it. It's there. It's public. Anyone can forward them. They've yet to take them down. So I haven't been censored from Facebook yet. But so just, again, look out One Chiropractic on Facebook. It'll be like a teal looking thing that says "We support One Chiropractic," is our picture. And that's really the best way. Video has been the best way for me. It's very easy for me to turn it on and talk rather than writing and creating a bunch of, pieces of paper that people won't read. So, and then if you do choose and feel the right to contribute, you'll get a video every week. I will be sending you information, what we're doing on a weekly basis, the different strategies that we're bringing out, all of that different stuff. So that way, that's the best way to stay in communication. And then obviously you can forward any of that stuff, but we'll keep stuff on our Facebook page as well.
Okay, my last question to you, Baron, is I know you're like almost like a one-man show and you probably have somewhat of a supporting staff. I don't want to overwhelm you with connections, but I have a really good connection. I think you connected with Michael Sonoff.
Mm-hmm.
You connected with Nom de TVO in Canada. So I don't want to overwhelm you, but are you okay if I keep bringing you connections?
Absolutely. Bring it on. I do have a team that I delegate when it needs. I keep a lot of the relationship stuff close to my chest because obviously I have the most knowledge about what's going on. So I take those personally. But yeah, you will not inundate me with connections. There's always time in the day to have the right conversation.
Great. Super.
And Dr. Mo probably has some great connections in Canada too, being that that's your spot. So, well, Baron, thank you so much. It looks like we've got one more question. I don't know if this is addressed from Christine. When we apply for a license renew, they could easily ask for proof of vaccine. I guess that's kind of a later possibility down the line.
It is. And I mean, there's also threats. There are a number of licensing boards in the states that have already put out opinions that if you're caught in violation, they're going to view that as unprofessional conduct and remove your license and put it as a strike against your licensure, which is a whole nother legal approach we're taking on their ability to actually do that. Because that's even scarier. Let's say you win on the vaccine front, but then all of a sudden the licensing board says we're taking your license. There's multiple ways that they're trying to scare people right now. But we are working on that strategy as well. But part of our strategy of the exemption form, the licensing board cannot touch you until you're found guilty of something. And so until somebody somewhere finds you or says you're in violation of the mandate, the licensing board can't do anything about this. And they're not, right now, they would have to change state law in order to require that vaccine in order for licensure. And so far, we haven't seen that. But that would actually take a change in the laws in your state. The licensing board cannot just arbitrarily do that.
It sounds like, I mean, if the board of chiropractics, which, directs the licensure, it seems like who's on the board is going to be highly important for.
Oh, it's always been important.
How are they going to decide, to the pressure of the Department of Health or whoever it is in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always been important. That's why a lot of times, organizations and people need to have political contacts to be able to get the right people in the licensing boards. In most states, those are appointed by your governor. And it's very important who sits in those seats for days like today, where these types of topics are. And it's an issue on the West Coast. In Oregon and Washington, there's a very liberal grouping of chiropractors out there, and the boards are split. That's why they come out immediately and said, if you're in violation, we're going to put that as unprofessional conduct. And that's a pretty ballsy statement for a licensing board to come out and say, but that has to come from the members of the board. So yes, it's absolutely important that
we couldn't even get enough vitalistic chiropractors out in BC to vote against the X-ray mandate. So, the board is stacked against us on this one.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's crazy.
It's not looking good here, let me tell you.
Well, we're coming in to do what we can do for you guys. I promise.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Baron, thank you so much. And we'll just kind of make sure that people look at your contact info, which is on the top of the chat. So make sure you copy that and keep that. And you've just been so awesome for reaching out and being an open book, for being able to talk to. And I really thank you for being willing to talk, and everyone here for being willing to come onto this call. We're all busy, and this is such an important thing. So thank you for all your involvement. And next time I'll try to get a little bit more heads up on the call. So once again, thank you all for being here. And if you have any questions or anything like that, I'll stay online for a little bit. And anyone else who wants to stay online, I'm happy to talk for a little bit longer.
All right. Thanks, guys. God bless. You know where I'm at if you need me. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Baron.
Yep. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I guess I'm going to end the call and the recording. Thank you.